Welcome to the show, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Chad, and today we have on a very honored guest making his umpteenth appearance. It's the quantum businessman, Chris Anatra. Welcome back to the show, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chad. I'm so happy to be back to talk to you about more interesting, far-out topics out there. So this is going to be a great conversation. And hello to everyone listening.
Yeah, absolutely. You presented this list to me of all kinds of different subjects to talk about, but we're primarily going to be talking about Mandela effects. But first, before we get into those Mandela effects, you had the IMEC conference in Connecticut. How did that go?
Yeah, so the IMEC conference happened in Branford, Connecticut on Labor Day weekend, and it went amazingly well. There were 9 different speakers over the course of 3 days. And talking about all different types of topics about what are the possible causes of the Mandela effect. Some people gave presentations showing the latest Mandela effects that they've uncovered. Cynthia Sue Larson was getting into the quantum mechanics part of it. And we had a very special, our keynote speaker who actually zoomed in was none other than Tom Campbell.
No way.
Yeah.
Well, was he there in person or was it like a teleconference type thing?
Yeah, so for Tom, he asked if he could be like so he teleconferenced in. And at first we were like, or at least me, I was a little bit skeptical of having Tom on because he was on Open Tables, which is what IMEC, or the International Mandela Effect Conference's monthly program, is called. And we were talking to him about Mandela effects. And even though he was Mandela affected for some of the things we brought up, he felt it was more of a misremembering type thing. So we were very curious. When he accepted the position as our keynote speaker, we were very curious as to how he would present the information, especially with how he presents the larger consciousness system and so forth. But what happened surprised all of us. And when he told this one story, he got applause from the whole audience, which was really interesting.
Well, can you share a little bit of that story?
Yes. Okay. So I'll share a little bit of the story. So he had his whole presentation that he gave about consciousness and how it could change and how the Mandela effect is tied into that. And then what he did is he talked about an experience that him and his wife had. And I'll just summarize this real quickly. But basically, while he was getting his presentation together, him and his wife were clearing out one of their medicine cabinets, and they had all of this old nasal spray. And they're going through it, seeing what they had to throw away. One was a brand called 4-Way Nasal Spray. And he specifically remembers him and his wife looked at the 4 ingredients that are in 4-Way Nasal Spray. And they wrote them down, they did research on them, and then they decided to buy that nasal spray again. So they bought it. I don't know where they bought it from. It comes in, gets delivered to them. He says he looks at the bottle and there's one ingredient on it. And he's like, oh, they must have changed the formula for the 4-Way nasal spray. He gets the old bottle and that now only has one ingredient. And he's like, I know, me and my wife, we researched all 4 of those ingredients and now it's always had one. So I feel like we've almost converted Tom to understand more about how the Mandela effect works. And I just want to say one more thing about it. 4-Way. So it's interesting because on Open Tables, it's the 4 of us. So maybe the 4 of us did a 4-Way on Tom Campbell to help him understand the Mandela effect. There's hidden meanings with everything.
Yeah, I love Tom. I've had him on the show 3 times, but I just don't understand why he's not on board with the Mandela effect, especially with him being able to go out of body and, see other realities. How can he not know that? And that's one of the things that just doesn't make sense to me. But I'm glad that he experienced the personal Mandela effect. Now he knows it's real. And that's pretty cool. So overall, you would say it was a success?
Yeah, I think it was. I gave my presentation was really far out. I actually ran out of time. I had everything in PowerPoint, and I thought I'd have enough time, but I actually ran out.
What if can people watch that on your channel, or was it just for the conference?
Yeah. So what's going to happen is we're going to start releasing the videos to our Patreon members first, so they'll get them all like a week ahead of time, and then about a week later, we're going to put them on our own YouTube channels and on the IMEC channel. So I believe Tom Campbell's is going to go out on Monday the 18th or Tuesday, September 19th. So our Patreon members can see that first, and then the following week we'll make it public, and then we'll go through it. I think I'm third or fourth on the list. So probably in 3 or 4 weeks, people will be able to see the video that I made, the presentation that I gave.
Cool.
And,
yeah.
Yeah. And I took Fruit Loops, you know, the Fruit Loops Mandela effect.
Yes.
Okay. So, you know, so I was able to interpret what that means. And I won't tell you the whole thing, but I'll just tell you one part of it. So Fruit Loops went from Fruit to Froot, right?
Okay, I think we have a picture of that as well. So let's bring that up. It's going to cover us, but there it is, the Fruit Loops.
Yeah, and for those two O's, a lot of us can even remember like how the U and the I were shaped in that same kind of font as the rest of it. But now in this particular timeline, it's always been OOT. So when I was tuning into that one, and what happened when I tuned into it, I'm getting better at meditating, especially in the mornings when I wake up. You can get into that hypnagogic state. Right. I was getting that's not, sometimes it's the frequency of the words. I was getting, no, that's not what it is. It's an acronym. FROOT is an acronym for representing frequency repeat of original timeline. Frequency repeat of original timeline loops. Because that's one of the things I talk about, how like there are the time loops. That's why we get deja vu. We call it remembering the dress rehearsal. So
did you came up with that yourself?
That's what I was, when I was in that hypnagogic state, that's what like flowed right into me. It's like acronym, and this is what it stands for.
Incredible.
Yeah. So I get into that. And then also I get into the missing cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom underwear.
Okay, I know we got a picture of that too.
Yeah, bring up the underwear.
Hey, my mom used to buy this for me.
Yeah, and a lot of people didn't know even what a cornucopia was, until they, because I saw it on their underwear, so that's how they knew what a cornucopia was. So, and as we know in this timeline, it's never had the cornucopia. So what's going on with that? And then that led into, when you like tune into that in the Akashic records, that gets into, just summarize, it gets into time travel. It gets into military type time travel. It gets into, especially in Connecticut, the Pequot Indian tribes and other tribes. And because the other place people remember the cornucopia is from Thanksgiving. Right. You see the cornucopia with the Thanksgiving decorations. So basically there was an event that happened that rippled through time. And as a result, that sign of abundance on that cornucopia, or the horn of plenty, got removed from that underwear brand. So in the presentation, I go through that whole thing and how that was affected by actual time travel. So yeah, it was like far out there. So, but people that watch my channel like kind of expect this type of information from me. And when you first watch what I have to say, listen to what I have to say, it might be like a little too far out. But when you put all the pieces together, it actually makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, you do talk about a few things that are pretty far out, I would say, to the average person. But for the viewers of this channel, I think they definitely flow with you. Now, the next thing you were talking about was like how the cereal aisle can kind of like explain reality. What is that about? I have a picture for that too.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah. Okay. So yeah, here's a typical cereal aisle, at your local Walmart or grocery store. So what I did was I used this as an example to show how this reality works in the matrix, so to speak. And again, this at first seems to be a far out concept, but when you understand how the matrix works, it actually makes sense. So to, again, describe this, summarize it. Basically, how did this cereal get into your supermarket? First, you got to think, well, the farmer had to plant the corn in the fields. How did the cornflakes get there? The corn grows in the field. The big tractors come out, harvest the corn. That corn's brought to the Kellogg's processing plant. You've got all these workers making it into cereal, and then it gets packaged, and then it gets delivered, and it gets to your store. That's how our left brain processes that information. Like there's no other way for that to happen. But if you are dreaming, and you are dreaming in a type of super quantum computer, so to speak, is that the way it actually happens? So there's a whole concept of the player characters and then the non-player characters. Now, if there were any player characters involved in that process, then they would be observant of how that, any part of the supply chain, how it got there. But if there were all just NPCs that were involved, that would mean that it just actually appeared on the grocery shelf, just like if a tree falls in the forest, does it make a sound? So introducing that concept and how video games work. So if you're playing like Grand Theft Auto or something, and you've got a 50 square mile map and you've got, 500 players, does every part of that map have to be rendered at the same time? It doesn't.
No.
Yeah, you only render what a player character can see. So, and that starts to get into like, what are food shortages? Like what exactly is going on with that? And what does it mean when there's plenty of food in the supermarket? How does that all play into our frequency and how we are playing the game and dreaming the dream? So I got into that too, using the example of a cereal aisle.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're saying in some sense, the cereal just appears there. If it's along every supply chain of the way, it's an NPC.
If there's no play, and there could be player characters involved that could observe it. It could be a truck driver who's a player character, and they observe it, getting loaded on the truck. So that's part of the process. But if you see a tree that's fallen in the forest and there is no one there to see it fall, could it be that the Matrix's calculations have shown that tree fallen over, without anyone having to be there to observe it? So it's using those same type of concepts. Saving processing power. That's what we do in the software world, right?
I agree with you. I made a video a couple of years ago talking about how the universe is rendered, and I talked about all these concepts. Most of them come from Tom Campbell, talked about it as well. That's why I like Tom so much. But it's all super interesting, and that leads us on to the next segment of our interview, which is about timelines, specifically a JFK example. I know you also want to talk about time travel, so I'll let you get into that as well.
Yeah, so basically at the conference, I was surprised to learn that I thought a lot of people were accepting of the whole timeline concept for Mandela effects, but that wasn't the case. I think most people were, but there were a lot of holdouts, like the whole timeline thing didn't make sense to them. So it's either this way or that way. The Monopoly man, has a monocle or he doesn't. There's no timelines that are involved. I see like you want to say something, Chad.
No, every time you say the Monopoly Man, I think of Ace Ventura: Pet Detective 2, who had put the Monopoly Man on his shoulders, and I'm waiting for that movie to one day not have the monocle.
Yeah. So, and it could happen. But with the JFK assassination example, that shows how the timelines work, because it's not just 3 or 4 people in the car to 6 people. It's a whole sequence of events of how it keeps changing and changing and changing. Like my first memory as a kid, it was only black and white film, and there were actually just 3 people in the car. It was the driver and JFK and Jackie in the back. And then it became 4 people. Then it became 6 people. Then it became full color. Then everything about the video changed, and now you could hear the gunshots. And like there's like basically you can see the timelines, how they're coming together. So using the JFK assassination as an example, I think that could help people understand how there could be timelines that are involved in these Mandela effects, and how they're all coming, kind of squeezing together into these 2 main branches of timelines.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Whatever is causing the Mandela effect, whether it's something that is happening within the fabric of reality, or the creator, or maybe whoever's running the simulation, do you think they ever had any concern for the people in the simulation like us who have these now false memories, thinking like, wow, this is really strange. Reality is changing.
Yeah, I do. And I think there's different levels. I think that there's levels of those that are manipulating the reality for their own advantage, that would hope that we would never see the Mandela effect. And if we did, they would say like, you're misremembering, confabulating. And then there's the other group in the chess game, so to speak, where it wants us to observe them, and not just observe them, but to seek out the hidden meanings of what they are. In the presentation I made, I say that the Mandela effect is the consequence of retribution for those that are manipulating the natural order. So there are those that are manipulating the natural order, I believe, and then we can see that as a result of the Mandela effect. They can't hide it from us.
And what about time travel? How does this relate to it? Because you sent me some notes. You wanted to talk about like spiritual versus technological time travel, like Project Pegasus, the Tesla Vortal tunnel technology and jump rooms, of which I'm familiar, and Andrew Basiago. So how does time travel play into this?
Yes, so those types of time travel, St. Elmo's fire is another one where the lightning would hit the mast of the ship. We've talked about this before in related to the Hindenburg and how there was St. Elmo's fire the day the Hindenburg went down. So this ties into believe it or not, this ties into the fruit of the loom missing cornucopia Mandela effect. And in the presentation, and part of this, the second part of the presentation is myself and Sean Bond. And for some people that watch my channel, they know who Sean is. We get into this specifically, and then we talk about forming an organization called the Time Defenders. And we had a silly motto for it, like protecting the universe from the assholes who stole time travel technology. But basically, like what happened with the cornucopia thing, like that leads to all these other things as well. So there was a call for those, because I was also tuning into the audience. 88% of the people that were in the audience, whether they knew it or not, were time travelers to some extent. And they also had a link into these different, we'll call them time cop or time authorization factions. So we made a call out through them to do something interesting. And I believe it's already begun to have an effect. So stay tuned. I might be able to provide more information about the Time Defenders.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, sometimes when you send me notes, I like to do some research. And I stumbled across a really interesting article on Andrew Basiago and the jump room. He had traveled back into the past. He was in this project from about 1968 to 1972 as a child, and they were using children to travel through time. Does it seem like all of a sudden I got dark? For some reason, I don't know why. Dark.
Maybe slightly.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there, but anyway, so the point is that he went back to the Gettysburg Address. He went back to the time that Lincoln was assassinated, and he also went to Mars with Barack Obama, of course. You know, he had to go with Barack, but this is true. I'm not making that up.
Yeah.
He talked about that on Coast to Coast AM. I think he might even been on Project Camelot, and I want to make a video on that. Next. I've talked about him, but a while ago. But the whole story is super interesting. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Yeah, if you could ever get him on the show, he's really hard to get a hold of because he's kind of went blind, so he needs a lot of assistance. But if you ever interviewed him, that would Wait a minute, he went blind? I think he's legally blind.
Really?
He says that he feels that scalar weapons were used against him. So,
wow.
Yeah. Yes.
He was a lawyer, and I know that he tried to run for president of the United States in 2016.
Yes.
Yeah. He could be being, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Targeted.
Now, we're gonna move on. Are you ready to move on to these 9, not 8? We promised 8. We're giving a 9th one here. 9 Mandela effects.
There might even be 10.
Might even be 10.
Yeah, because I sent you a couple more last minute, but now these might not all be Mandela effects for people, but I think if at least one of them is, that would say something. For me, they were, but that doesn't mean that they're for everybody.
For me, I was unaware of several of these, and one of them is definitely a Mandela effect, and it's probably my favorite one. We'll get to it.
Okay.
But the first one up is unicorn birthers.
Yeah, what is a unicorn birther? Does that mean someone that gives birth?
Is that the birth of a unicorn, Chris, or is it something different?
It's something different. what was interesting is this one came to my attention when I went to Ireland, in July, and I was with a group of people, and one of the people that were there was saying, I never see Mandela effects. And then he looks on his phone and he's reading about someone they're wishing for their friend to have a unicorn birth. And we're all like, what's a unicorn birth? And so basically he already got like a Mandela effect right away. So we did some research into it, and it's a thing. And basically a unicorn birther is a woman who, when she gives birth, it goes quickly and painlessly. Her body gives off all this oxytocin. She dilates to 10 centimeters right away, and the baby is born. And it's a positive experience versus what most births are now is not so much. Now, I have 4 kids, right? Been to all the Lamaze classes. The last 2 births were actually in my house. With I forget the name, the nurse that comes in and is there. Midwife, thank you. Mm-hmm. So they're at the midwife, having all kinds of conversations over the years. The whole thing I've never heard of a unicorn birth before. And so people can look it up. They say that it's possible that as many as 1% of births are this way, but I had no idea. And I spoke about this on another podcast that I did, and people were commenting in like, yeah, like I have a friend, or, my relative was born this way, and et cetera, et cetera. So to me, if I'm a woman and I'm going to give birth, I want a unicorn birth, right? Just the kid pops right out. So
yeah.
So to me, that's at least a personal Mandela effect for myself.
Okay. I don't know if I'll have anything to ever do with the unicorn birth. Not planning on having children, but I'll take your word for it.
Okay.
And that moves us on to the second Mandela effect, which is about Noah and the Ark. And this is a Bible Mandela effect. Raven and the dove. Can you explain? I thought wasn't it supposed to just be 2 doves? So now it's raven and a dove.
Yeah.
What is this, Chris? What is this?
This was another one too. Like when I was in Ireland with the group, one of the ladies there was telling me about how she watched a show that I did or something, and I talked about the Bible Mandela effect of, instead of it being 2 doves that Noah lets out of the ark, it's a raven and a dove. And I'm like, I've never talked about that. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. She's like, I know it was you. You're the one that taught me about the raven. So basically, for myself, being raised, in a very religious household, you knew the story about Noah and the ark. And you knew that he sent out 2 doves. There was 1 dove, it came back because it couldn't find dry land. And then like 40 days later, the other dove is released, and it comes back with an olive branch in its beak, so that they knew that the lands were drying up and it was getting ready. They could get off the ark. Now in this timeline, what actually happens is that it's always been a raven first. And it appears that the raven never comes back. It's from the book of Genesis, chapter 8, verses 6 and 7. And I have it written down here. It says, at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made and sent forth a raven. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up from the earth. So that whole thing about the raven was completely new for me. So it might be new to other people that are watching this as well.
Hey, yeah, for the viewers watching this, drop a comment. Let us know if that's new for you or if you've always remembered it that way. We're curious. Just take a little poll here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one that's new for me too. We're going to move on to another one that's new for me, which is, I guess, a new transparent fish called a sea salp, S-A-L-P. And I actually have a picture of it. We've come prepared. There it is. It doesn't even look real to me, Chris. It looks like it's some type of glass or something. But yeah, I've never seen this before, ever.
Yeah, somebody sent me a video of a diver playing with one. And like, when it comes to these mandanimals, which are the Mandela effect animals, okay. Could it be that it's always been there and I've just never known about it? You think that some things you'd know about, like there was that one fish that had like human teeth. I don't know if you ever saw that.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, it's like, I think I would have known about that. Yeah, but these sea salps are really interesting because they're pretty much completely transparent. And I've even seen other things where fish will go inside of a sea salp to try to hide from other fish, but they can still see it because the other fish is swimming around in the sea salp. So, yeah, I had never known that these things existed. So,
and I heard that they actually use the muscles in their body to swim, like they oscillate, and they're relatively harmless. And some people mistake them for jellyfish, and you can eat a sea salp. You'll be okay.
If you have enough cocktail sauce, I'm sure.
I don't do any sauces, Chris. I just eat it raw. Now,
I know you do.
Except the vegetables. You got to cook those vegetables. But the meat, I've got some pork I'm going to try raw too from the farm.
It depends.
We'll see if I live through it.
It depends on the vegetable or the fruit and if it's exploding or not. But we'll talk about that.
Yeah, that's another Mandela effect. Okay, well, moving along, we have the Copper Dead Sea Scroll discovered in 1952. And yes, we do have a picture of that as well. Put it right here. So this is the copper one, copper top.
It's the copper top, exactly. And so for me, well, this was part of when I was getting my presentation together for the IMEC conference. I was getting into the number 64, as the number 64 being a clue to how the reality works, starting off with the concept that there's 64 squares on a chessboard. But basically, I started coming up with all of these things that number 64 was related to. And one of them was the Copper Dead Sea Scroll. And I'm like, what the heck is the Copper Dead Sea Scroll? Because again, growing up, in a religious household, the Dead Sea Scrolls were like an amazing find. It helped show that the Old Testament, they can match up the Old Testament, to the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I had never heard of the Copper Dead Sea Scroll, which was discovered in 1952 in one of the Qumran caves. Mm-hmm. And the research that I did on it, it took them 10 years to unroll it because it was all sealed together and they had to slowly figure out how to unroll it without damaging it. And it contained 64 locations of buried treasure. And people have been hunting for this treasure since the 60s, since they figured out what it was about. No one's ever been able to find it.
Can you imagine if it was all spoof? People playing a practical joke from how many years ago would it have been? 2,000, 3,000 years ago?
Oh, it was it was carbon dated. It was carbon dated to be from that same time frame. I believe they said it could have even been made from the copper coins from the Roman Empire that were melted down to actually make the scroll.
Well, what would that have been about? Like 1500 BC, something like that?
No, it would have probably been around 60 or 70 BC. They said it was like either before or right around the fall of Jerusalem, which I think was around 70 CE. So around that time period. So
to this date, nobody has ever found any treasure.
No, but what's interesting is that, so there's been a lot of archaeology discoveries that have been being made in the recent years. Things that have always been there, but we've never seen them for some reason. All of a sudden they're appearing. So could it be that these treasures are there? They're just in a higher frequency bandwidth. And then when we get into that higher frequency, all of a sudden we're going to start finding them. In the lower frequencies, you wouldn't see them, but in the higher frequencies, they would just be there because that's where they're at. So that's another concept for all of this. And just to add one more thing, I was watching a documentary about the copper scroll. So I think it was made in 2020, and the guy that was conducting the interview was I thought I knew everything about the Dead Sea Scrolls. He said, I've never heard of the Copper Dead Sea Scroll, and he asked the person to explain it. But the point is that this person who was conducting the interview, he doesn't realize it, but it was a Mandela effect for him too, because he was into all this and he had never heard of it. And to me, I would have been as a kid, let's find the treasure. It's a treasure map. So yeah, so a lot of times people are Mandela affected and they don't even realize it.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me a little bit. I don't know if you ever read the book, The Count of Monte Cristo.
Yes.
With the treasure that Dante found, and he became very wealthy, and he hid it. He hid it on an island, but yeah, I guess these treasures are not found too often. A lot of treasure hunts and maps, but not too many treasures.
And then all of a sudden they're found. Or like in Mexico, they've been finding all of these unique ruins that they've always been there, hidden by the jungle or whatever. And now they're all being like revealed and they're starting to be excavated. Some really interesting things.
I found a $20 bill in the gym this past week. Not exactly treasure, but hey, I'll take whatever I can get, universe. Thank you. And that brings us to even the next Mandela effect, which I believe we have a picture of. And that is the last photo of the Titanic right there. Oh, maybe there's more than one, though.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So for those of you that like watch my channel, I talk about the Titanic a lot and I do a lot of research on the Titanic. I was doing some research and I just kept coming across in all my searches, the last photo of the Titanic. And I'm like, I thought it was like when it was in dock, that was the last photo. But there's at least 2 photos that claim to be the last photo of the Titanic. The one that you showed, the first one, let me see. According to Time Magazine, this photo was taken by Irish Jesuit priest Francis Brown, who sailed with the ship for the first leg of its journey from Southampton, England, to Cobb, Ireland, then called Queenstown. The priest would have stayed for the remainder of the transatlantic journey, having received an offer of a ticket from a wealthy family he befriended while on board. When Brown reached Cobb, however, he received a note from his clerical superior ordering him to return to his station immediately rather than sail on with the Titanic. So this is a picture. This one claimed to be the last one and has like a whole history about it. Again, with all the research, this had never come up in my research. This is another one that claims to be the last photo of the Titanic, taken by a woman named Kate Odell as she disembarked Queenstown on April 11th, 1912. So, and I believe there's at least another one that all claims to be the last photo of the Titanic that I had never come across before. So to me, Mandela effects for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. That one, I just don't know. I didn't know how many photos, the last photos of the Titanic, but I take your word for it, Chris. And now we're up to one where, do we have pictures of this or is it just video?
There is a picture of pearls in a clam, and there's also a video.
Diamonds and Pearls, one of my favorite Prince songs. That's what it reminds me of. But yeah, now this one is now we all know that oysters make pearls, but there's something else that makes pearls too. I'll let you talk about that as I'll put up the picture.
Yeah, so in my old timeline, only oysters could make pearls, and they made white pearls. In this timeline, saltwater clams and freshwater mussels can also make pearls. And they can make pearls that are different colors, such as blue, silver, black, lavender, even gold. And I'm like, gold color? Because you would see people wearing necklaces like that, and it'd be like artificial, right? They're not real, not a real gold colored pearl. But in this timeline, with certain types of freshwater clams, they can actually make these pearls of these different beautiful colors.
Yeah, and we actually have a video to show you about that. So I'll go ahead yes, we do have a video.
Yeah, we do. I was going to say too, like just to preface it, I'm not sure about the authenticity of this video because it seems like too dramatic, but at least we'll give people an idea.
All right, Chris, here's the video. Let's play it. Here's a woman pulling up a really large clam. It's so interesting, Chris, because whoa, those things don't even look real.
I know. That's why I was like, it was hard for me to kind of believe. I mean, you can research it, and it does say online that clams can make all these different color pearls, but it just seems to be. I'm not sure if this video is real or not. If they put something inside the clam first, how it gets edited, that type of a thing. So.
I mean, it looks real the way she's cutting open the inside of the clam, but wow. Crazy. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and you could find there's other videos similar to this where people are pulling out blue pearls and that type of thing. But regardless if that video is real or not, to me, again, only oysters made pearls. It wasn't clams. So
or mussels.
Got me. Or mussels.
Mussels. Yeah, I mean, I learned so many new things when you come on the show, Chris, really. Well, the next one we have is my favorite Mandela effect here, and that is Laurel and Hardy. And I'll let you talk about it. We also have a video to show you.
Yeah, so there's a very famous saying that they would say when they got into a bad situation, and I'm just going to say it with the blanks. That's another blank mess you've gotten blank into.
All right, let's go ahead and play the video with sound.
Well, it's another nice mess you've gotten me into.
Did you notice like the title of the video? Another fine mess, the way we remember it. And then, but it doesn't even say it that way. Whoever titled it, remembered it being a certain way, but now it's like another nice mess you've gotten me into. Now, some people might remember the me into. I remember us into. Mm-hmm. That's another fine mess you've gotten us into. So it's interesting because me, Mandela effect, M-E. So
yes.
Yeah, there could be like a little code there to show that this is a Mandela effect. So someone recently brought this to my attention. I did a little bit of research on it, and Moneybags 73 Evan actually spoke about this one about 10 months ago on his channel, and he actually had some residue where people were imitating Laurel and Hardy, and they were saying it the way we remember. So
I just want to say 100%. I remember it the way you remember it. This is another fine mess you got us into.
Exactly.
And it's just something ingrained because it's like it's kind of like Desi Arnaz on I Love Lucy saying, Lucy, you got some explaining to do, which he's never said at any point in the whole show. Like that was his catchphrase. This is the catchphrase for Laurel and Hardy. There's no way you can forget it. For those viewers watching right now, leave a comment. Let us know if you remember it different than how Chris and I do. Another fine mess you got us into. If you remember it like you saw it in the video, that would be super interesting. But I bet very few people will remember it that way.
Yeah, and there's a whole generation too of people that don't even know who Laurel and Hardy are. So
exactly.
It won't have any effect on you.
I mean, look, I train in the gym, and I'm around guys that are like 20, 21. I'm sure they've listened to a lot of 70s and 80s and 90s songs. But for the most part, these kids are not really watching TV, right? They're watching whoever is the influencer or the person that's popular today, but they really don't. There's so much that they don't know of the past. And that'll be lost to the older generations like us. And then eventually they'll just think it was always that way because that's the way it shows up on social media now.
Yeah, and that just shows you how easy it is for the global narrative to change things because the generations go by very quickly and the new generation has no knowledge of what the older generation knew as a fact. So
new generation, do your research. As well, the Little Rascals, they're not even out anymore. Like you can't see them on TV, right? Didn't Bill Cosby buy them and kind of shelved it?
Yeah, that sounds familiar, but I remember always watching the Little Rascals, Laurel and Hardy, Abbott and Costello.
Yes.
Like all those things were like staples for me in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, they would come on like on Saturday or Sunday, mostly Saturday. It would be the Kung Fu. I watched the Kung Fu movies. Godzilla would come on. It was so cool. All the cartoons, like that was the time you watched TV was on Saturday.
Yeah, exactly.
Saturday morning specifically.
King Kong versus the King Kong robot and all that.
My God, man. Please, you're killing me. Such nostalgia and memories, Chris.
I know.
I long for those times, but then again, I wouldn't have these new times with you if times didn't change. So out with the old and with the new. We're going to move on to the next Mandela effect. That was a real interesting one. And this is number 8. And we're talking here about exploding watermelons. Chris, you bring up a lot of colors, foods, things like that. This doesn't surprise me. You've talked about pumpkins, exploding watermelons. Can you explain that to me? I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay, so this actually came up on day 2 of the Mandela Effect Conference. I was going through there's an example of a pumpkin that exploded on its own that had nothing to do with Gallagher.
Wait a minute, Chris, a watermelon or a pumpkin?
This one is a watermelon.
Okay, because I think you said a pumpkin.
I'm sorry, watermelon. So you have pumpkins on my mind, but so there was this news release about, throughout America on people's kitchen counters, their pumpkins were exploding.
Wait. Did you say pumpkins or watermelon?
Watermelons. I mean, I said
pumpkins. Yeah.
Okay. Their watermelons were exploding, and it turns out it's a thing, so that watermelons, if there's enough solar radiation that's coming in, they can begin to ferment, and they will actually explode. So the whole concept is that because there is more solar radiation that's coming in, especially in the form of gamma rays. And by the way, I sent you a picture of something called sun cups.
Yes.
If you bring those up.
Oh yeah, we have them in alphabetical order here, just to keep things real organized. There are the sun cups. What is that, Chris? Is that snow?
Yeah, so this is snow. This is taken from a picture from Yosemite, I believe, April or May of this year. Okay. And basically what happens is the snow will form these patterns called sun cups when there's more radiation, solar radiation coming in, specifically gamma radiation. So the planet is being hit with more of these types of solar rays, cosmic rays that are coming in, that are causing sun cups, they're causing watermelons to explode, they're causing people to turn into the Incredible Hulk. This wasn't a gamma radiation.
What does that mean? What do you mean? Wait, hold on. You didn't put that in the notes. What do you mean Incredible Hulk? What are you talking about?
I'm just being silly with that. But wasn't the Incredible Hulk, he got like a big dose of gamma radiation?
Yes.
Don't make me angry. And then he turns into the Hulk.
By the way, man, I love that show. I would watch that show. They would have Wonder Woman, Dukes of Hazzard, and they would have the Incredible Hulk all kind of back to back to back. I think it was Friday night, maybe Saturday night, but I think it was more Friday night.
Yeah.
And I would watch that show. And, you're watching that whole show and you got David Banner. I forgot the actor's name that plays David Banner. He's very mild-mannered. And you're just like, come on, man, be the Hulk. Especially when someone pissed him off. I was like, come on, man, let that Hulk come out and beat that guy up, It was so good. Lou Ferrigno.
Yeah. And, the $6 Million Man with Lee Majors. And yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
That was quite the lineup. I think
we can rebuild him.
Yeah, faster. We can rebuild him.
Stronger. So some of that, do you remember the one where it goes, the greatest American hero, the guy that used to fly?
Yeah, or he tried to fly, yeah.
He tried to fly.
It was called, but yeah.
If you look back on it today, like those shows were so hokey, but when you watched them in the 70s and 80s, it was like, whoa, this is some high level stuff right here. This is good TV.
Exactly. Yeah, that was fun. That was fun TV. Looking forward to it. And you couldn't record anything. You had to watch it live. You had to have everything ready, because starting at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock, whenever it started, if you missed it, you missed it. You had to wait for the rerun 6 months later.
And you had to watch the commercials, right? Because you never know when the show's going to come back. Yeah, maybe you could guess it's going to be 2 minutes and step back. But in general, you watch the commercials. Now we've got, we DVR everything. But I mean, if you still watch TV, I watch a little bit of TV and I DVR, I go right through the commercials. Yeah, I'm not a big commercial guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's get to the next one. This is the 9th one, and there might be a 10th one, but this one is very interesting. It's orcas and elephants that could mimic human speech. Now, they could never do that in the past, but when did things change? When did they start mimicking human speech?
Yeah, so the first occurrence that I could find that elephants can mimic human speech was from about 10 years ago.
Okay.
So there was a video that was put out by, I think, the Associated Press, showing a zoo, I think it was in South Korea, where they had trained an elephant to mimic human speech and say words in Korean. And I had never heard of that. I didn't realize that an elephant could do that. And they say that somehow it uses its trunk to manipulate its mouth to make the sounds. And there is a video that you can play. I'm not sure if that's...
Oh, I have the video, Chris. I've come prepared.
Okay.
So let me present it to you.
Yeah, so people can get an idea of like what I'm talking about.
Okay, Chris, here's the video.
Yeah,
Okay.
you'll notice how like when the elephant was doing the human speech, it was putting its trunk into its mouth.
Yep.
Somehow it's manipulating something to make the sound come out like a human.
Yeah, because these animals don't have a larynx like us, and they're not able to enunciate like we can, so they have to improvise. Very interesting. I mean, I didn't hear it. Like, I understand that. I listened to the video before we even did this interview, and it's a little tough, to hear the elephant. But we do have one of an orca, and I think it's much clearer. So we should probably play that video too.
Yeah, orcas can mimic human speech. Yeah, let's play that video as well. I think this is from 2018, I believe.
Yeah, Chris, this video is from 5 years ago. I'm going to play it now.
Okay.
Hello? 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
There you go. Again, I had no idea that orcas or elephants could do anything even close to mimicking human speech.
Yeah, I didn't know that either. I knew that they have a very complex language where they could communicate over very large distances using their kind of sound or sonar. But yeah, I didn't know they can do that. So now, Chris, we pretty much covered all of those Mandela effects. Is there another Mandela effect that you want to talk about?
Yeah. So one of the things that I'm always watching is the human anatomy and how that's changing. And I noticed a couple of things recently that for me were a change to how some of the internal organs are configured in our body. So I sent you a picture of one of the kidneys.
Is it this one right here?
That's the liver.
Oh, okay. Sorry. How about the kidney right there?
Okay. So, a lot of us, well, first of all, the big Mandela effect for a lot of people was that the kidneys always used to be in the lower back, right? Therefore, the kidney punch and that type of thing.
Yep.
The Mandela effect was that the kidneys are now, up in the rib cage and protected by the ribs. But now they look different. One kidney is higher than the other, and one kidney is larger than the other. And when you do some research on this online, it'll say, depending on the person, the left or right kidney will be bigger, and then one of them will be lower. So one's always bigger and one's lower. See, I don't remember that. I remember them being, going back up in the rib cage, but then also being of the exact same size and configuration from each other.
Right.
So that's interesting too. And we might be able to make a correlation between the kidneys and fear, because there's this thing called the emotional code chart where it talks about the different emotions of the body and where they're stored in the organs. And the kidneys are known to store fear. So with all of the fear going on in the world, or what's trying to be pushed onto us as fear, could the kidneys changing their orientation and not being matched like they were before, could that be a result of like this fear maybe having an effect on a lot of people? So that's something that for me, it's a Mandela effect. And I actually have a photo, like I had talked about in some of the videos I made, I talked about the kidneys. The picture I had on my hard drive changed as well. I remember the kidneys being like right next, right directly across from each other and the same size. And the picture on my hard drive changed. So yeah, are we in a timeline where showing the kidneys and how they're related to fear? Could that be like a sign of how we're trying to be manipulated?
Yeah. We spoke about that. It's interesting because when you watch boxing matches now, I don't know if they talk about kidney punches. Like the referees usually says, watch your kidney punches, but you don't hear them really talking about that much anymore.
Yeah.
That's because, of course, the kidneys moved up.
Yeah. And I was like looking at sites about having kidney pain, and they still talk about kidney pain being all like, they show pictures all the way of the lower back. So I'm like, that's weird. Like the kidneys are up here, but they're still showing people like having backaches from their kidney pain.
I'm kind of curious, like what has replaced the space where the kidneys were? Is it just your intestines now, or?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like all intestines. And I've also been noticing like the position of the heart is weird, because it was always set to the left, and then it was in the center. And I was doing some research online as well. And the heart now, some pictures show it exactly in the center, and some pictures show it offset to the left again. So like, what's going on with our human avatars?
I can't tell where my heart is. I have too much muscle in here, but if I didn't, I would know where it was. I can't place it. I have to think of it in the center now.
Yeah,
it was always on the left, because when we do our Pledge of Allegiance, we put our hand over here.
Yeah, what's interesting though is I started I couldn't find any of it, any images of the human anatomy with the heart to the left, and now I've been finding some with the heart to the left and in the heart of the center. And then the other one I sent you was of the liver, the one that you showed before, because I always remember the liver, well, below the rib cage. To some extent, it extended below the rib cage, and it didn't go all the way across. Like right now, it goes all the way across to where the stomach is. I believe that's called the left lobe of the liver. So I don't remember the liver ever being that big and being so far across and so far up. So to me, like that part of the human anatomy for myself has changed. And I keep watching these things. I keep looking to see what's different.
Yeah, well, I would say about that is the liver processes a lot of toxic waste that we ingest through food, medication, water, all that. So maybe the liver has to get bigger and better to tolerate more of the toxins in our world. But also, I do remember it as being on one side, more so on one side and not across like you. And also, I remember it not being fully protected by the rib cage.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why liver shots can be so effective in fighting.
Okay. So if it was below the rib cage.
If it was below the rib cage. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I believe there's the famous fighter Oscar de la Hoya fought Bernard Hopkins, and Bernard Hopkins was able to knock him out with a liver shot.
Interesting.
Right there. So I don't know when this change took place, but that fight was probably at least, I'm going to guess, like 15 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to go back to that fight and see if he still gets knocked out with the liver shot.
I think he does.
Yeah.
Who knows? But, look, it's all interesting how the timelines converge.
Exactly.
Well, Chris, I thank you so much again for giving us your time. We spent a lot of time today. I think we're almost at 2 hours that we've been together. We talked a little bit before, a little bit after, but it's always a pleasure. It's been a while, and I'd love to have you back on in a month or so.
Yeah.
Got things to talk about for sure.
Seems like there's always I can't think of anything, but don't worry, in a month there'll be something to talk about. There has to be. There always is.
Yeah, I can count on that with you, Chris. You definitely bring new and entertaining subject matters to every interview that you do. Just tell people where they can find you again. What's your YouTube channel?
YouTube channel is Quantum Businessman. I have a website called quantumbusinessman.com. And you could send me an email directly to chris@quantumbusinessman.com.
There you go. And I'll list your social media below as usual. Thank you so much to everybody in the crowd who joined us all the way until the end. It's been a pleasure. And I'll leave the last word to you, Chris.
Dream on, dream on, dream on, dream until your dreams come true.